Hey guys, it's Todd. Welcome to the Do Different podcast. Got another fantastic guest, and we're gonna have a good chat, and hopefully you guys will learn some stuff. So this is Monique Brignoni. Hey Monique, how
Yeah,
are you?
I'm very good. Thank you so much, Todd, for having me on your wonderful show. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. So for the viewing audience or those that don't know you or kind of what you're about, why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little elevator pitch as to what you do.
Okay, is your audience ready?
Yeah.
So, I support animal lovers who are facing one of the hardest things that we can ever go through, which is the end of life journey of our beloved animal companions. And so, there's a lot to say, but basically, I help them tune into their pets' wishes and I share what is really happening so that they can feel confident about their choices and actually walk their journey together with deep love, connection, and peace. Because usually it's done with a lot of grief and sadness and not knowing what to do. So I help them with all of that. And that helps also to keep that love connection to the other side when they actually leave their physical bodies. And I also train animal end of life doulas, so people who feel called to support others through this tender transition. And I teach them practical, emotional, and even energetic and spiritual tools that allows to bring, let's say, light in the darkest of moments. So these are the two things that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, and that's I love kind of hearing you talk about that because people that either don't have animals or might not just or they just started, they don't realize. I mean, that can be a 10, 15, 20 year
Yep.
journey through life that yeah, relationships form and feelings form and it's dealing with the passing of someone that you cared about, you shared memories with, and it's important
Yep.
to understand kind of what that's about because it can unfortunately, I mean, it can freak some people out. Let's just say call it what it is.
Absolutely. And you know, Todd, the thing is that we prepare for everything in life, like absolutely everything. You know, we prepared for this, we put the lighting right and everything. But the one thing that is for sure, that is certain in life, is that we all die. And we kind of want to wing it and like wait until the last moment. I don't want to speak about death. I don't want to know that. It really touches. And this is both for humans and animals. But the problem with that is that then we arrive ill equipped to that moment, right? And I always say that we can't learn to swim during the perfect storm, right? So it's really important to look at this beforehand. And it doesn't mean to go on like down the journey of death and learn all about, bad things, but it's quite surprising how when we learn about these challenges and the things that we fear and the end of life, actually we live a better life. We live a more connected life. We have deeper bonds, we have more joy. So it is actually really a beautiful journey, a journey of healing as well. So yeah, but we need to prepare in advance, otherwise, yeah.
Right. And like I love hearing that connection because as human beings, a lot of time you're right. People are like, I'll think about, my end of life when it's the end of my life. And it's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
there's other stuff. And I think, sometimes we look at pets differently because it's like it's a third party, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
we
Yep.
view that end of life as far as I want to make sure they're comfortable enjoying their last years and stuff like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
But what ends up happening, I think, is a ton of people end up learning a lot more about themselves
Thank you.
than
Absolutely.
than
Yeah.
they do about, their beloved dog or cat or whatever.
Yeah, because we all like instinctually know it's like not a conscious thing, but subconsciously we know that our animals live, like you said, from 10 to 20 or 15 years. And we will actually probably, most probably, how do you say, overgrow them? I might not have the right word, but kind of like they will die before us.
Right.
And yeah, and that actually teaches a lot, a lot. First of all, because pets are, for a lot of people, they are really part of our families. And because they're able to give what humans find it really difficult to give, which is unconditional love. So I love you no matter what, right? Even if you leave the seat up, even if you don't look at me, even if you think I'm fat, whatever the thing is, right? But we have all of these conditions that if somebody does something that we don't quite like, it's like, well, I love them a little bit less, right? And a little bit less. And depending on what they're doing, there's like animals don't. They just love you unconditionally. They don't have that rational mind that says, you know what, Todd, I wish you would do something differently. And because of that, when you feel that love, it just resonates with the love that we all have in our hearts, but that we put all of these conditions on top of it, and then we don't shine it completely. But with an animal, actually, it really does open up that true love, right? That deep love. So that can be a very emotional moment for a lot of people, right? Some people even go to the point of saying it hurts more when my animal goes, and for all the reasons that I just said, right? So, but independently of that, what I've seen is that sometimes we do things for animals that we wouldn't do for ourselves, right? So by learning this journey, then it's also a guide for us. So when we arrive at that moment, but also when our loved ones, human loved ones, arrive at that moment, because the end of life, so the last cycle, the last moment, is actually the same for all living beings, animals or humans. And we can see certain similarities. And when we know actually what is going on, then we can remain peaceful. And I've had many of my students have, maybe during the class, we were talking about the animals and the quality of life and all of these things. And I could see them thinking, they go like, wait a second, my dad is going through that. My aunt is going through that. And the great thing about this course is that, the course, sorry, I'm talking about the course because I teach courses on it, but the great thing about knowing these things, actually what is really happening, not just on a physical level, but also on a mental, emotional, and spiritual level, right, is so important because we have the bigger picture of what is happening. Because during the end of life, the medical system, even humans, right? And that's why I'm saying it's the same, humans and animals, so vets and doctors, they, we are taught to look at the body only. The problem is that during the end of life, the body is the only thing that's going to go downwards, that's going to become weaker and weaker. So we are looking at the one thing that is, becoming weaker. But what is really happening at the end of life is also that whilst the body is growing weaker and weaker, the energy is expanding more and more. And within this expansion of energy, there's so many things that are happening. And now we can really understand what both the human and the animals are feeling in these moments. So we're not just looking outside, at the body of our pets that is bedraggled, or we that, becoming really thin and not talking anymore. And we just think, oh, they're suffering, oh, they're in pain, right? Because we're looking at the body, but we don't realize that this energy has an impact on the body. So when we learn those things, we can go like, oh, wait a second, this is better.
Right. You're not,
Yeah,
it's not a, it's less of a physical connection and more of a, mental, spiritual, just that love and that what you feel inside, that's where the true connection is. And you're
yeah,
right. I mean, as life goes on, we all tend to, gravity takes effect, right, on
yeah,
everybody out there. We all start to
yeah,
kind of go like this. But even though that's physically what people see, that I mean, we've all seen them, 85-year-olds that are just like living their best life every single day. And it's
Yeah.
because up here, they don't, they look at it just like you said, it's like physically, yeah, stuff's happening, but
Yeah.
mentally, they're just living their life, their best life. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that animals have separate from us because they lack that perspective. They're going to have their best day on their first day and their last day,
Thank you, Todd. That's beautiful. Yeah. That's absolutely, I love that. That is so beautiful because it's true. We suffer a lot about when the end of life comes because we've got all of these rational thoughts about what we don't want, what is better, what we should do. So from the moment that we get the diagnosis, and this is both human and animal, for ourselves or even for our animals, the moment we get the diagnosis, our everything changes inside of us, right? So imagine that you're a dog, right? And your person, all of it, you're seeing your dog, being a bit weaker or something. You take your dog to the vet, and then what happens? The vet gives you the terminal diagnosis. So now you go home with a heavy heart, and that heavy heart stays until the end, right? Now, if you're in the dog's pose, let's say, you go like, hang on, what happened with Todd? We went to the vet. Okay, it's not a nice place. I never like going to the vet, but wow, where's his love? Where is his joy? Why is he not laughing anymore? Why, when he takes me on a walk, is he going so slow and he doesn't want me to do this? Well, we completely change. And so it's really important to actually know that this journey for them is not like we see it, right? There's nothing that we need to do. There's nothing to feel bad about, in the sense of we need to realize that they're feeling us all of the time. They're very sensitive to our energy, right? In the same way that when you're sad, and your dog will perceive that, right? You know that. And so imagine if all of a sudden, for months and months, you completely change your energy. And that's the gift that that's the gift that we are giving to our pets when we don't do something about it. So learning about death doesn't mean learning about all the bad things and make the bad things come. It's more about, how do we hold that love? How do we hold that joy so that we help them? How do we make their last moments the best, right? But we are the ones that need to change, because I tell you an example. I had a client, and she learned that her dog, had cancer, and the vet told her that the dog would really suffer a horrible death, and they say a lot of things like that. And so she went home that day, and 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 the dog was the same as the morning, right? But in the afternoon, after the diagnosis, the dog wanted to go walking, and so he was wagging his tail and everything, and she looked at him and she said, "Oh no, oh no, I'm not taking you out because I don't want you to get worse." And from that moment onwards, she changed, and then she even started telling the dog, "You know what? You're not tricking me. You can't be happy. You must be in severe pain because you're about to die atrociously from this illness." And gosh, I know it's an exaggeration, but it's not. This is what was happening, because as humans, we go into these lower emotions, I call them, the hormones of stress. And in the hormones of stress, we get that tunnel vision. And the only thing we can see is the end. The only thing that we can see is the suffering. We can't see all the rest. And this is not the best thing that we can do for our pets. So, yeah.
Well, and to take your example of someone goes to the vet and, gets that diagnosis, and then they come home and it's, they look at it because they're sad.
Yep.
So the dog responds, and I'll use a dog, but the dog
Yeah.
responds appropriately, and all of a sudden they're sad. And so the owner, the whatever you want to call them, owner, parent,
Yep.
whatever, looks and says, well, it's because you have this that you're starting
Yeah.
to act this way. When the true reality is the dog doesn't care. He's sad
No.
because you're sad. Whereas
Yeah.
if you came home with a, you know what, it sucks. We're gonna go through this. We're
Yeah.
gonna enjoy this last part. That dog knows no different,
Yeah.
and they don't feel any different than they did in the morning.
No.
Nothing, but it's that interaction and that interplay of how your emotions, especially with an animal who, you might have spent the last decade with, developed true feelings with,
Yeah.
that interplay of how emotions and attitudes and actions can impact each other. And
Absolutely.
I think that's something like that people that you help people learn is like don't treat it as like this
Yeah.
horrible thing. Like enjoy
Yeah.
the time. And
Yeah.
I guarantee the dog is or cat or whatever is going to enjoy their time because they know no different.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing is, they don't fear death, right? This is a human thing about it because again, it's like in the world today, we're used to having everything. Oh, I don't like that. I'm going to change the channel. Oh, I don't want that. And there's always this, I've got a headache. Let me take a pill. The animals actually are able to live with what life gives them. I had a cat that was tortured. It was awful. And I was looking at her after the event, and I was in pain for months. I was like, shocked completely. And she would look at me, and I could see from her eyes, she was going like, yeah, she was just living every day as if it was just a new day. She ended up only having two legs after that horrible event. But do you think that she worried about it? She was like, okay, I've got two legs, right? I'm going to walk on two. And she would, pull up the back legs, well, the little stumps she had left, and she would just walk on her two front legs like a duck, on two little. And honestly, there was nothing that would bother her. She was like, okay, where's the lizard? Where's the mouse? Where's and she would drive me crazy because I would want to pick her up because I would go for a walk, right, with the cats, and I would want to pick her up because I go, how is she going to walk with just two legs and two little stumps? Oh no. She was like, I am walking. And but beyond that, she was just really, she was okay with everything that comes. And that's the other thing, we put pain on them. We feel that they are suffering. But that's just really a reflection of us. And that's why it's super important to actually know what is happening, what is true pain, and when we do need to go to the vet, right? And what is not. And the end of life, if we think about it, is not even it's not even a duty of the vet because the vets are keeping our pets healthy and alive, when they have. But the end of life is just a little. It's just like when we are born, right? It's the same threshold. It's just the same door, but it's just going the other way. So it's like we don't, when we come into this world, we don't just appear from one moment to another, right? It takes 9 months for us to grow in our mother's womb. And it's not our mothers that decide, you know what, I'm going to create a heart, lungs. Ooh, I'm going to create 2 feet as well, and I'm going to put so many. No, it's just like there's an intelligence that creates us from these cells, right? And so we have to remember that there's an intelligence throughout our lives, but also at the end of life. That same intelligence is there. So there is a specific process that happens when we get to the end of life, humans or pets, that is at play there. And when we know that, then we know what to do with it. Then we don't feel helpless. Then we don't have to be in that worried state the whole time. Then we can be peaceful because we know what is happening, right? And we know that it's not pain, or we know what to do. We also know what to do and what not to do. And that really changes everything. That really changes everything. And the problem is that when we just focus it on like in a medical event, it's actually a big trauma. It's a big trauma for us as well because all of a sudden, we go with our dog, for example, to the vet and with a wagging tail, and we come out without because they tell us, oh, in the future they may have pain, and so we don't. That's the last thing we want, right? And so maybe we do euthanasia too early, right? But I have, since I've learned all of these things, what I've seen that I don't even need euthanasia anymore because they peacefully die at home without any need for that because I'm able to, first of all, I know what's happening. I know what to do, what not to do. If I need a vet, I always have a vet. I can call them, not saying not to go to the vets. But at the same time is, dying is that process that the animals know what to do. The animals know how to die,
Right.
right? And even humans knew how to die. If you think about it, it was something that we learned, it was passed on from generation to generation on how to support the dying in our house, in our homes. Now it's just like, well, I don't know what to do, so we kind of give it over. We give like the responsibility over to the medical system, but it's not really their thing. They're learning how to keep the body alive, not you know, to turn the body off, to kill the body, to, end the life.
Right. Well, and I think that's the biggest difference between like what we're talking about, like, if a dog is going through genuine physical pain,
Yeah,
well,
I
a,
agree.
a vet can help that.
Yes, yes,
And but then the thing that we have to come to grips with and understand is that while the vet can handle the physical pain
yeah,
through a pill or a shot or whatever,
yeah,
all that dog knows is, oh, it used to hurt, it doesn't hurt. I'm going to go
yeah,
back to tail wagging and wanting to walk. But a lot of
yeah,
times we interject our own limitations because
yeah,
we feel smarter and we know what's going on.
yeah,
That,
we do.
that those animals don't care. They're just
Mm,
like, it did hurt. It doesn't hurt. I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing. And
absolutely.
if I
Yeah,
feel sad or if I feel down, it's not because my hip hurts. It's because you're projecting that onto me
yes,
that
yes,
I should feel bad.
yes,
And I mean, we've seen it, right? Like the
yeah,
dog will come over and put their head in our lap or
yes.
they'll curl up. And it's not because they feel bad. It's
Hmm.
because they're looking at us and wanting us to feel better.
Thank you. That's exactly true. Yeah. And animals, they've got all of these senses, these six senses, because that's how they survive in the wild, right? So they need to know who's behind the corner, when to mate, where to find the food, when to find shelter, how they're sensing the environment the whole time. And therefore, but when we bring them into our houses, they still have those senses, right? And so now they're in our emotional soup. And so all of a sudden they're sensing us as well, right? And so that's why they're going like, ooh, Todd's not well. So let me go and support Todd, right? And so, but they're not thinking, oh, I am not well. And that's why Todd's not well. And so let me feel sorry for myself. This is just a human thing.
Yeah.
In fact, in I often go to Africa, and I remember a long time ago, one of my first times, I remember that I saw a zebra that had a leg that was half torn off by probably a previous encounter with a lion or something, but the zebra was still there. And as I saw that leg, I was going like, oh, yeah. And I remember turning around to the guide and saying, oh my goodness, call the bush vet. Please, please call the bush vet because that zebra is really suffering. I was in hysterics. I was like, we need to do something. It's like, we need to do something in the wild animals of the yellow savannah. Here I'm coming from Switzerland and I wanted to fix it, right? And so the guide, just goes like, hmm. And then he says, are you sure that the zebra is suffering? And I was appalled by his reply because it's like, what do you mean? The leg is nearly hanging off. How do you think that the zebra is feeling? But I looked back at the zebra and I turned and I looked at the zebra and I was going like, the zebra was eating grass. Now, you and I know that if you're in deep pain, you would not eat grass. You would not be calmly eating grass. Well, this is an example of how animals, we are the ones that are suffering. So pain we all have, both animals and we do. But the suffering is that mental conversations that we keep having in our minds. I always give the example of, an impala running from a lion, and then they manage to, escape, and then the impala goes down to the local bar and starts saying, you know what happened yesterday? That lion nearly caught me. And then, you go through the story and how it was painful and how I felt the breath of the lion on my face and all of those things. This is a human thing. Because the impala, on the other hand, 2 seconds later, they're eating grass. And I have so many pictures of actually zebras or impalas close to lions sleeping. And they're just like eating grass. And you would think, do you really want to eat grass next to the lions? I learned a lot from these trips. And it was like, well, they know exactly when the lions are getting up. And one day there were two lions that got up, and I was going like, oh gosh, they're gonna run away. And the zebras just didn't even give, like and I was like, why are they not running? And then I realized that the lions were about to mate. There was nothing, they didn't have the intention of running for food. The zebras knew that. The Swiss person from the, from the Jeep didn't know that. And I was projecting my run, you're gonna get eaten. But yeah, this is the thing, right? They know exactly. Their senses are fine tuned to what is happening. So they're feeling us that we are sad, and that's exactly like you said. That's why they're sad. They're sad because we are sad. So it's our job to change how we feel so that we can support them. Otherwise, the last gift that we give them is our sorrow, is our despair, is our sadness.
Right. And it's, if you want to enjoy the entirety of your pet's life,
Yeah.
then go enjoy it. No
Yeah.
matter what, the vet with the degrees all over the wall and stuff like that, it doesn't matter what they say. It's like
Yeah.
if there's physical pain or something that they can, you know, just get them back
Yes.
to where they're not hurting, then
Yes.
just do that. But then go for walks and go
Yeah.
enjoy it, and don't just enjoy it from puppy until something
Yeah.
happens. Like,
Yeah.
enjoy the entire journey,
Yeah.
because the end of that journey is coming for all of us at one point or
Yeah.
another. Um,
Yeah.
but understanding that interplay and that interaction between how we're projecting how we think they feel
Yes.
outward actually creates them to then reflect that back on us. And, like if we're like, oh, I'm so sad, guess what? Your animal's going to be sad.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
the same time, if you're like, let's go for a walk and we're going to go do this, that animal's going
Yeah.
to be tail wagging, like, let's do it. I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's why learning beforehand is really important. And it's not about learning. I mean, you can also learn the stages and the signs and the symptoms and all of that, but that you can also learn towards the end, when they are on the journey. But what I really would like people to learn about before is that connection, right? Is what you're talking about, key holding this connection, realizing how they are living certain things, how we can change our energy, how discover our pet's mission, let's say, right? Why they came in our world. And so we also see that when they're going, there's like some sort of completion that is happening. There's so many things that we can look at, but mainly it's about us. How can I stay in this expanded state of like I'm usually I am, rather than being in these filled with these hormones of stress and having that tunnel vision and being in that fear. How can I do that? How can I change that? How can I sustain that? Because, for example, I went from pulling my hair, Todd. I was like, as I said, I described it before, the Swiss woman that wanted to control everything. But I went it from pulling my hair because, yes, I have a deep connection with animals. And so, I wanted to save them. I wanted to, oh gosh, yeah, I had to learn a lot. Um, I went to the point where I was even digging my pet up after I buried him because I just couldn't, it was just so much. And because I was to that extreme, I understand how a lot of people are feeling. But at the same time, I can tell you that today, my cat, by the way, the one that only had two legs, she died in August. And it was just so easy. Easy in the sense of because we have this deep connection. Up until the last moment, we were sharing love, we were sharing, like tenderness. And yes, of course, a few tears came here and there. But because that connection was so strong, I didn't feel the loss. I don't know if it makes sense. It's just like because I've been doing this for a long time now, and I know how to keep that connection alive. So she died in a week. It was all of a sudden she went. I could see that she started. She was all okay, and then all of a sudden I started thinking, what are you doing? And because I recognize the signs, I know them now, and I go like, no, this can't happen. We never want that to happen, right? But in a week, she just went from totally normal from what I could see. And then she just declined, and then she went after a week. And in that moment, I was just loving her even more. I was taking care of her even more. We didn't need to rush to the vet. We didn't need to have all of that agitation. What do I do? What do I do not do? Like, and all of that stuff about I don't want this to happen. I don't want, that comes from being in those hormones of stress, in that fight or flight situation. It was
Hmm.
more of a love, the more. And the great thing is that, like I was saying before, is that although the body is difficult to watch the body getting weaker and weaker, because their energetic field is getting stronger and stronger, we can actually, when we are connected to that love and that love inside, we can actually feel so many other things. We can feel a peace that we've never felt before. We can feel emotions that we usually wouldn't feel at the end of life, because usually it's about worry, grief, helplessness, and all of this. And I can say that when we learn all of these things, what happens is that there comes like a sort of completion, like I said. And because of that, the grief kind of comes during the end of life, not at the end, but then it gets healed by our animals in that moment. So we are having grief in the moment that our animals are still alive. So let's say, we become really sad and go like, oh, because, it's normal to feel sad. So it's normal to have certain moments too. We can't always, we can't be happy all the time. But then they come, and maybe with their wet nose, they smile at us, or they look at us with a goofy smile, a goofy gesture, and we just change. We go from grief and sadness to cracking a smile, and
Hmm.
yet so they help us, and this helps our brain deal with grief. And so when they do leave when they leave from their physical body, the brain already has done a completion, and so it doesn't keep asking you in the grief. When we're in grief, it keeps saying, where's Fluffy, right? And oh, Fluffy's gone, and you go down, right? There's like a completion that happens, and yeah, it's just a completely different thing. And that's why I love the title of your show, because let's do it differently. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very true, and very well said. So for everyone else out there, thank you for watching the Do Different podcast. All of Monique's information you will be able to find in the show notes below. And if you want to rewatch this episode or see what else we're talking about, just like and subscribe. But other than that, Monique, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm going to hand over the last 2 minutes to you to wrap us up and kick us out of here.
Okay, so you're leaving the heavy work up to me, Todd. Thank you very much. So yeah, no, I'll just be very simple. Learn about it now. I have studied this for many, many years, 10, 15 years, and I can tell you that there is a difference between learning about it now and waiting until we are in the emergency where we can't learn anything, we have to remember this is the gift that we're giving to our animals. Do we want it to be love, or do we want it to be our grief? So that's what I want to leave you with. And yes, and let's do things differently, right? let's at least let's at least look into how we can do things differently. Let's do that.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's very well said. So, again, thank you very much,
Thank you
Monique.
so much.
And thanks for tuning in. And we will see everyone else out there a little bit later.